welcome to my second sketchbook tour. This is my first time ever completing an entire sketchbook, so I'm really proud of myself for doing that. This sketchbook is just a cheap mixed media sketchbook from Kmart. I think it cost me about $5. It's not any particular brand, just a generic Kmart brand. And it's got this kind of textured off-white paper on the inside. I started this sketchbook in August of 2022, so it's been about, say, 7 or 8 months it took me to finish it, and I did pretty much the last third of the sketchbook I completed in the past week. So if you want to go back and watch my previous video, that was where I sketched every night to finish this sketchbook and finally achieved my goal of completing an entire sketchbook. I'm just struggling with this tape here. I need to retape that in. Anyway, on the front here, I've just taped in some mail from one of my Instagram friends, who Uni and Umi, washi tape that she has, and just the look, all the nice little stickers and stamps on there are really cute, so I stuck that in. And then I have previously shown, my last sketchbook tour, I showed some of these before, but I've added a lot more since then. I think I showed like the first quarter in my previous sketchbook tour, but I'll put in a timestamp, so if you've already seen the previous sketchbook tour, you could just skip ahead to the point where I started, where I have new sketches that weren't in the previous one, if you know what I mean. But the first one was just a chalk pastel drawing of a scene from My Neighbor Totoro. And this is where I really started getting into landscapes and trying to branch out from just drawing like cute characters and really getting more into landscape illustration, which is something that I've really enjoyed working on, especially over the past month or so. But this is where I first really started with landscape drawing. And this was probably my first ever full landscape. It's of this little dude called Mort the Pig, and it's a mushroom cottage. This was using gouache. It was my first time ever using gouache, and it's it's jelly gouache, so it's just the cheaper stuff. It's not the highest quality gouache, but it's pretty cool. I really like how you can get vibrant colors. And yeah, I was actually really proud of this painting. It was my, as I said, my first time ever painting an entire composition with backgrounds and characters and all that kind of stuff. So I was really happy with how that turned out. Also went in with some Posca markers and coloured pencil over the top just to add a bit of texture and dimension. This is some strawberries. That was another attempt at using jelly gouache, a little frog, some lavender I think, and this was when I first got my Posca markers, so I was trying those out, just a little bunny rabbit and frog, like Vogue. More testing out the jelly gouache, and this was for the Amphibian August challenge last year. I painted, I'm not sure what type of frog this is now, I can't remember. But I did a few traditional paintings of frogs for that, for the month of August. Another landscape and just a little cat wearing a wizard hat, testing out my Posca markers again. Really happy with how vibrant they are and how much pigment you can get down on the page. And it doesn't transfer over or really bleed through, which is nice. And this was another Posca illustration of a deer. This one was a gouache and coloured pencil illustration, and it was actually a study of another artist on Instagram that I really like her work. It's Ella Art, or LA Art. So you can go and check out her artwork. I'll put a link in the description. I absolutely love everything that she does. And this was where I first started getting into the technique of layering gouache and coloured pencil. I love the textures that it produces, and the coloured pencils that I use, which are these Lyra Rembrandt Polycolours, they layer really nicely over the top of gouache, and they have a really nice textured look to them. Here I just sketched out some mushrooms using graphite. This was a gouache painting of a frog for, this was for another Instagram challenge. I think it was for Flotsam, or who was it? It was a frog party, and you had to draw a frog like wearing a party hat, or an animal wearing a party hat. And that was my gouache painting that I came up with, and there's another alcohol marker illustration of a frog saying "Cowboys do it better." I still want to turn this one into a sticker. And this is a little dude that's perched on someone's finger. These alcohol markers are again just cheap ones from Kmart, and they do leak through or bleed through onto the other side of the page in this sketchbook, but I think that's pretty normal for alcohol markers. This was a painting I did for an Instagram Draw This in Your Style challenge. I never actually ended up posting this one, but it's just a little chicken in a field. And again, this was me getting more into landscapes and combining gouache with colored pencil. I like the composition of this one, but I really hated it when I first did it. Looking back at it now, I don't hate it as much, but I never posted it anywhere. I might try and recreate it now that I have a little bit more experience with gouache. This was a sketch for an Instagram, another Draw This in Your Style challenge, I think, and I did end up turning that one to a finished illustration. I'll see if I can put the finished illustration in here somewhere. This is a painting of a rosella and some golden wattle, which is a native Australian plant. This is when I wanted to get into painting more Australiana type stuff, like Australian animals and nature, just because a lot of my audience comes from the US, and a big problem that I have with my shop is the cost of shipping. It's fine if people buy stickers, but if people buy like bigger art prints and they're from overseas, it's pretty expensive to ship, and that's why I wanted to start doing like more Australian animals and nature inspired artwork, so I can kind of potentially bring more Australian shoppers into my shop, because it's much cheaper to ship those products, and it's just better for buyers that they don't have to pay so much for shipping. Here I was doing just some ink sketches with a fine liner. It's a little cat that I drew. I really like this one. I turned this one into a sticker. Turned this one to a finished illustration, but I don't think I made it into a sticker or a print, although it is up on my TeePublic store, I think. This was for December Delights, which was another Instagram prompt list. I never finished that one. And here is when I started doing some paintings following a Domestika art tutorial on painting whimsical landscapes in gouache. So you'll see a few of those studies in this sketchbook. This was for the Winter Pokénoms challenge. I don't think I turned that into a full illustration either. I might have. But yeah, just some more work with fine liners. Here were some sketches for a drawing that I did of Sylveon. I was just working out the poses and the composition, and I think I ended up going with this one. So I'll see if I can put in the finished illustration somewhere here too. Here was that Domestika gouache painting course again, where I was learning how to blend colours with gouache. And I tried to do this illustration of a deer. I really didn't like how it turned out, so I just put one of my stickers over the top. This was for the Domestika course, just painting a silhouette of some trees in gouache. And here, for learning how to paint clouds and skies, and just different types of leaves and bushes and grass and that kind of stuff. This was my plan for a sticker sheet. I've suffered from migraine since I was about 12 years old. And I find I can never really get into using those migraine tracking apps, especially when I am in the middle of a migraine. I don't want to be taking out my phone and looking at a bright screen. So that's why I designed a sticker sheet. So then people can use them in their planners to track, like when they get migraines, what side of the head the pain is on, the triggers, all that kind of stuff, and they don't have to look at a bright screen while they're doing it. And I did end up finishing that sticker sheet, and it was in my, not my most recent shop update, but the one before then. Here was more studies from that Domestika course, how to paint water, different types of water, so like rough seas and a lake. And then this was just an original gouache illustration that I came up with using the techniques that I learned in the course. And I painted this on a TikTok live. Pretty happy with how that turned out. Here were some more sketches for the winter Pokénoms challenge. There's Blissey and Wooloo, and I decided that I wanted to do a Wooloo painting. And this is what I came up with. It's some Wooloo grazing in a field. I never posted this one either, but it was another thing that I hated at the time, but looking back on it now, I don't hate it as much. It's actually not that bad. I like the Wooloos, although the composition is kind of boring. There could be like some more trees or something going on around here. It's very empty. But I'm still very new to painting landscapes and understanding landscape composition and all of that. Cat, frog, just some of my things I like to draw when I don't know what else to draw. Here, I was looking at some references on Pinterest of some vintage toys and I just drew them. There's like this Cabbage Patch doll thing and a cat, and this is one of those toys that it's got like a stick on the end and you push it around and it rolls the ball. And a frog guy wearing a suit and carrying an umbrella. And here are some little grumpy desert rain frogs that I sketched. Here is when that Borzoi trend was going around on TikTok with the "Didn't I Do It For You" audio from the FKA Twigs song. So I sketched some Borzois. I really like the color palette and the softness. Again, I was using the Lyra Rembrandt polycolor pencils, and yeah, they have like this really nice, as you can see, like a very textured, especially on this paper. So really nice, and then you can layer it to achieve like a more dense color, but they go down really nicely and then they blend nicely as well. More illustrations using colored pencils. This is my dog Mort, portrait of him, and this was another reference that I got off Pinterest of two Borzois, and I thought it was a really nice picture, and it was fun adding in all these like vibrant colors and highlights. This was a sketch for another Instagram challenge prompt of cat in a field of flowers. I think I didn't go with this design, I went with a different one, which is later on in the sketchbook. This was for Uni and Umi's Draw This in Your Style challenge. I didn't go with this design, I was just like trying to figure out some composition and stuff, but I don't like using alcohol markers. I can't figure out how to blend them or how to get them to look nice. Whenever I use them, it just looks like a kid drew it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but maybe I just need to get better quality markers. These are just cheap ones again. And stuck in something else from a sticker order. This was a sketch of a bear wearing a bear with antlers. I think I did turn that into a finished illustration. If I did, I'll put it here, but I can't remember if I actually finished it or not. More sketches. I asked my partner to give me an idea on what to make into a sticker, and he told me to do a cowboy frog holding a gun and riding a capybara. So I sketched it out, but I haven't turned that into a sticker design yet. Let me know in the comments if I should turn this into a sticker. And here I had an idea of like cats dancing around a maypole, but I couldn't get the composition right. Again, I need to go back. I want to put like a little note here to finish this. Because looking back, like a lot of the time I hate things, as has been a common theme in this tour so far. I'll hate things when I'm making them, and like immediately after making them I'll hate them, or maybe I'll hate them for like a week afterwards, but then if I go back months later, I can kind of look at it with fresh eyes and realize that maybe it wasn't that bad. Here's the cat in a field of flowers illustration that I did. This was for the We Draw and Garden challenge on Instagram. I think they had a challenge for like cats and plants, and this was one of the prompts, and I turned this one into a print. And here there was something underneath here that I didn't like, so I just covered it up with one of my mini prints and a sticker that I had used in a recent market for my wall art prints. This is just I do a lot of doodling while I'm at my computer. I just doodled all this stuff on the back of a envelope, so I stuck that in with some of my miscut stickers. This was a sketch that I did, another We Draw and Garden for that cats and plants prompt list. And then this one turned into this illustration, which I put into Procreate and cleaned it up. And this was planning for some Valentine's Day stickers. Valentine's Day greeting cards. And this one I did turn into a greeting card. This one I turned into a finished illustration. That one I didn't go ahead with, but I kind of like it. So I might put in another note to finish this one. Here I wanted to do some like plein air type sketching. So I went into my backyard and I just got a graphite pencil and really loosely sketched this tree in our backyard and the fence. Didn't turn out very well, but it was an attempt. Here I drew a person. I pretty much never draw people. As I said in my last video, I very, very rarely draw portraits. It used to be exclusively the only thing I would draw was portraits of faces. I would never do full body illustrations or anything like that, just like close-ups of people's faces and like maybe the head and shoulders. And yeah, this was just like a little, sometimes I still doodle them when I'm like watching a video or whatever, but it's not my first choice. I prefer to draw animals and nature and like food, fruit kind of things these days. Just stuck that in because I had a blank page. This was that sketch back here. I turned that into this illustration, and then I put this into Procreate and finished it and turned it into something better. Put this into Procreate and finished it, made it into a finished illustration. This was like a duck off design that I thought about doing, but then I didn't go ahead with it. Some more random doodling. I found these references on Pinterest of these cats in vintage frames, and I wanted to do a series of like cats in different ornate vintage frames with different names. So this is Gregory, Peaches, and Charlesworth. I did Gregory and Peaches, but I have put that series on hold for now. I might revisit it later on, because the Gregory illustration was especially popular. A lot of people like that one, and I do like Gregory. Just trying out some like vintage like 60s, 70s inspired paisley designs. I found this, I was looking at this before and I don't know what it is. If anyone knows, it says Shadow Moon Eye. If anyone knows what that is, please tell me, because I really have no idea what that is relating to. I can't remember doing that at all. Some more sketches of some cats. Here I was planning out my Draw This in Your Style challenge for reaching 1,500 followers on Instagram. So I just had a few different compositions. And I had the idea of a frog on a lily pad. And then because it was around Valentine's Day, I wanted to make it into like two frogs, kind of like a Valentine's Day theme. And I think I ended up going with this composition, or like reverse, so the bigger frog was on this side. Here I was inspired by some vintage illustrations of cats. So I was getting some references off Pinterest and just trying to draw these cats in my own kind of style, inspired by that vintage look. Here was my drawing of Peaches. And I like how this one turned out. The first one, not so much. This one's a lot better. Redrew Peaches again. And here was another attempt at drawing just a very quick graphite illustration of my backyard. Here is when we recently hosted, I hosted with some Instagram friends my first ever prompt list, and it was called Still Growing 23. It just finished recently. One of the prompts was community, so I wanted to draw these three little cats together. I actually didn't end up going with this design, but I did turn it into a sticker. I did do a finished illustration, but I didn't like it. I ended up painting my tomatoes illustration instead, kind of inspired by the idea of a community garden. But this was my first idea. Didn't like how it turned out, and this was really the turning point of when I realized I wasn't really liking my illustration style, and I wanted to go in a different direction and start doing like more Still like whimsical and colourful, but more realistic, more like serious art rather than just cute characters. I'm never going to stop doing cute characters completely, but I've wanted to, yeah, like focus on really improving my skills and taking my art in a more serious direction. Here, I drew some rabbits. I think I did turn this one into a finished illustration. But yeah, I realized that I didn't really know how to draw bunnies, so I just drew a bunch of different bunnies in different poses. A capybara hugging a cat. I like that drawing. I might turn that one into a finished piece eventually. Some chickens, and yeah, these were just different ideas for Valentine's Day inspired illustrations. Here's the one that I ended up turning into a finished piece. Here is when my partner for Christmas, he bought me, my partner for, was it for Christmas? Yeah. My partner for Christmas bought me a book that I've been wanting for a long time, which is Creative Illustration by Andrew Loomis. It's a book from the 1940s, but it's considered like, basically like an encyclopedia of information for anyone that wants to be a commercial illustrator. Even though a lot of the information about like finding commercial work isn't as relevant today, his tips on like composition and how to draw faces and all that kind of stuff are really relevant still. And if you don't want to buy the book, a lot of his books are available as free PDFs online. You can just search Andrew Loomis PDF and you'll find it on Google, and you can download the entire thing. But I would recommend buying the book, even though he's not alive anymore. I still think it's important to support the artist, so if you can afford to buy the book, go out and buy it. I really recommend them, but otherwise you can find a free PDF online. And I think the one that I was using is called Fun with a Pencil. That's the one that I was using a PDF of, and it has some really good like information about composition and how to draw faces and how to turn your ideas into, you know, actual drawings on a page, like take them from your brain and put them on the page. And this was using the poem about Jack Sprat and thinking like, how would the two characters look, how are they interacting with each other, and this is how they looked in my head. So that's how I drew Jack Sprat and his wife. And this was just some more faces that I did. This was an attempt at a still life just of a pot that was on my table, and here I drew with fine liner the plant that's hanging in my living room. Really need to take some cuttings of this pothos and yeah, but I don't want to cut it, I feel bad. Here are more faces using Andrew Loomis's Fun with the Pencil method and the Loomis heads. As you've probably, if you've watched ever watched a Proco video or anything like that, you probably would have seen this method. This is the more simplified version that you can use for drawing like really cartoonish type faces at different angles. And then it gets more and more detailed. And you can use these same techniques to draw the head at basically any angle. And I was surprised at how quickly my illustration abilities improved just in like a couple of days of following these techniques. So I really recommend it, Andrew Loomis's work, if you want to learn how to draw faces. And it doesn't have to be cartoony, you can use the same techniques to draw like really super realistic faces too. Here I just drew some frogs just to fill up the page. This was my planning for the Still Growing 23 prompt list. What's here? Here we go. So here is the tomato illustration that I was talking about before. This was a misprint. For some reason my printer printed it with these lines, so I decided I would just stick that in there. That's something that you can do if you need to fill up a sketchbook page, is just take one of your digital works and print it out and stick it in. Another grumpy desert rain frog. If you couldn't tell already, they're my favourite frogs. I like to draw them a lot. Here I just drew a page full of mushrooms using my coloured pencils, and here are some little doodles that I did at my recent market. just during, it wasn't very busy, so I had a lot of time just to sit there and you know, find something to do with my time, so I thought I might as well do some doodling. Here is a mushroom guy that I drew with my fine liner. I really liked this design, and I ended up turning him and the other ones that I drew into a sticker sheet. Here was, I recently did a study of Matisse, who I really like his artwork. He's probably one of my favorite painters from art history. And I went in with my alcohol markers to try and replicate one of his paintings of goldfish, which is my favorite painting of his. I also did a digital version of this, which you can see on my Instagram if you want to check it out. But again, I'm not very good with the alcohol markers. I don't know how to make them work at all. Like how as I said before, I don't know how to make them blend or anything like that. But yeah, I need to try out maybe some like higher end alcohol markers to see how I can make them work. And I actually kind of like the other side better. The bleed through somehow looks better than the original on this side. Here's another mushroom character. These are really fun to draw. Here I did one of those point of view illustrations of my living room, and here's that same plant that I drew more of a close-up of before. I've done a few of these in the past. They're kind of just a fun way to fill up a page. Here I found some old brush pens that I hadn't used, and I was just testing them out during a bit of writing, and drew this little angry guy and a cat in a box with coloured pencil. More mushrooms, and I really liked these characters, especially these little twins, I guess you would call them, like little mushroom babies. So then I decided to turn them into a sticker sheet called Forest Friends, and this is how I planned them out. And if I can find it, here's how the finished sticker sheet turned out. Pretty happy with that design. I really like these mushroom characters. And yeah. And I just drew some leaves down the bottom there because why not? Wanted to fill up the page. This is where I started really like the last, actually quite a lot more than I expected. So I filled up all of this section just over the past week, and if you want to see that process, you can watch my last video. But here I just drew some daffodils and a flame lily with some coloured pencils. And here I was doing a comparison of the Prismacolor, the Lyra, and the Faber-Castell coloured pencils. The Faber-Castell are just like the really cheap pack of 48 pencils that you can get from pretty much any craft or art shop. They're the kind of pencils that I used to get back in school when I was a kid. And that's what I used to draw this flame lily illustration. And I was actually really happy with how the colours came out. Like, it's a lot more pigmented and vibrant than I remember. I know coloured pencils on the cheaper side of things can be very chalky, not very nice to draw with, but these actually went down pretty smooth on this paper, and the colour payoff was decent. And here I just swatched some of the Faber-Castell pencils. And there's a really nice range of colours, so they're a good option if you're wanting like a cheap coloured pencil set that still has nice smoothness and colour payoff. This page I just filled it up with some flowers because why not? More flowers here, and this was an illustration that turned into one of my stickers that I made for my shop update. Although I stupidly drew on the other side with alcohol markers so it bled through. But that's how the sticker turned out. Yeah, here I was attempting to use alcohol markers again, and it is never successful. But some cherries. Tried to blend, I just can't figure it out. I don't know what you're supposed to do. Kind of liked, again, preferred how it looked on the other side, and I just went over it with some of my fine liner. Stuck in another print just to fill up the, just to cover up the ink bleed. This was a coloured pencil sketch using the Lyra polycolour pencils again, and it's a bunny wearing a backpack, and here are some cherries. If there's one thing I learned from completing this sketchbook, it's that I really like using coloured pencils above all other kinds of traditional media. And gouache too. I am getting more into gouache lately, but coloured pencils are definitely like my most familiar tool and the easiest for me to use. Here was a gouache painting of a Studio Ghibli scene. I think this is from Howl's Moving Castle, but I'm not 100% sure. I love Ghibli's, like the colour of their landscape artwork, the vibrancy, the impressionistic style with all the flowers. Like, they don't use too much detail, they use detail where it's necessary and eliminate it where it's not. And this was just my attempt at recreating a scene from that movie. This is where I decided to try to do some portrait sketches using the Andrew Loomis techniques that I learned from the Fun with the Pencil and the creative illustration books. And I decided that I was going to draw characters from Twin Peaks, which is my favourite TV show. As I said before, I don't do portrait sketches very often, but doing these I realised why I used to enjoy it so much. And here I wasn't too worried about capturing the likeness. It was more of an idea of the character and just getting the sketch down the page and not thinking about it too much. And then I just went in with some Posca pens to give it a colourful background for some more visual interest, I guess. This is Lucy, Audrey, and as I mentioned in my last video, an issue that I do have with sketching faces is making them too short, like they're kind of compacted. Audrey's face is longer than this, especially the mid face, so that's why it doesn't really look like her, and the same with Lucy. So I need to work on elongating the face a bit more. And this was a sketch that I did of Laura and of Shelley. The Shelley one has no resemblance whatsoever really, but it was an attempt. The Laura one doesn't really look like her facially, but I really like how I captured the hair. Like, she's got this really iconic 90s hairstyle, and I think I really liked drawing the waves. Like, it was really fun to draw. And the expression on her face is kind of capturing that fearful look that she has in the Fire Walk With Me movie. I also did a sketch of Donna. Again, doesn't really look like her, but I kind of like how the hair turned out. And here I just covered up the page with some more miscut stickers. This was a reference that I found on Pinterest of these two little Dalmatian puppies with love hearts instead of spots. And it had a red background, and I really liked the contrast of the black and white puppies with the red background. It kind of had like a vintage kind of feel to it. So that's where I got this concept from. Here's just another loose coloured pencil sketch of some peaches. I've really been into drawing like loose, like whimsical fruit illustrations with a bit of like different colours like pinks and blues thrown in. I really like how it looks. And in my other sketchbook that I've just started, this is a Winsor & Newton sketchbook. This is my new one. I did this painting of some lemons in that same kind of style, and it's similar to my tomato painting that I did as well. So I'm really enjoying this style, and I want to experiment with this more in my new sketchbook. But back to this one. Here is that Forest Friend sticker sheet, just a misprint of it, so I stuck that in here. Another quick gouache study of a landscape. I did start off using a reference for this, but I kind of went totally away from the reference and just did my own thing with the colours. And here is when I had about this much of my sketchbook left to go, and I was completely out of ideas for what to draw, so I just went on Instagram and asked some of my followers to give me some ideas, and I got a bunch of really good suggestions. I wasn't actually able to get through all of them, so I'm going to see if I can include some in my new sketchbook. But someone recommended cherry blossoms, so I just did this sketch in coloured pencil. Someone else wanted me to draw a raccoon, so I did this just with a black paint marker, not a paint marker, a brush pen, a black brush pen, which I really like. These are actually really fun to sketch with because you can get the interesting shapes with the brush, like the tapered ends is really fun to sketch with. This was another portrait sketch that I did of Shelley Duvall, who was one of my favourite actresses. It didn't really capture her likeness again. I made the face too short, but I really like her makeup and her hairstyle in this portrait. And this was going to be a portrait of Sissy Spacek, which is another one of my favourite actresses, but I couldn't capture her likeness at all, so I just scribbled it out. I wasn't happy and I couldn't be bothered finishing it. Here were some more suggestions. Someone suggested that I draw a crazy frog, so I drew this little guy that's screaming, and I ended up turning him into a tote bag, heat press tote bag. And yeah, just some more little desert rain frogs here, and some frogs wearing strawberry or raspberry hats. And I just painted in the background with some gouache and kind of diluted to give it that more watercolor look. Here was my planning for the tote bags. Here's the tote bag that I just showed. It was a little screaming frog. And I also want to do one with my dunce cap frog design. I am running a Kickstarter at the moment to turn him into an enamel pin, but I don't think it's going to be successful, so I might just turn him into a tote bag instead, or maybe something like a keyring that doesn't require as much money up front to make. I'll definitely make him into a sticker at least, because I can make those at home. Here's a duck. I think we've all seen this picture of the really chubby duck wearing a hat, so I had to draw him. And another suggestion I had was some bunnies, so I just drew some really quick bunnies again in that kind of style from earlier in the sketchbook. Someone said a bunny snail, so I drew a bunny snail. Someone else said ghost, so I drew my Eraserhead character, who I don't draw very often. And this is my first time saying this, but I'm planning on changing my branding soon and my name, because the name Eraserhead is because I love David Lynch. I love the movie Eraserhead, but it doesn't really, like, I've had that name since the DeviantArt days, which was like 15 years ago, and it doesn't really reflect the style of art that I do now, and I want to have a name that represents me rather than David Lynch, and a name that represents the kind of art that I make. So happy to take suggestions on new names, or if you think it's a good idea, or if you're an artist and you've gone through the process of changing your branding before, please let me know how it went, because I'm kind of afraid of doing it, because I have to do all of my business cards and thank you cards and everything all over again, but I think it will be worth it in the end. Anyway, here's another bunny with a little flower on his head. And someone suggested I sketch my favourite fruits. This is one of my favourite pages in the sketchbook. I did some cherries, strawberry, a mandarin slice, raspberry and an orange slice. I really like drawing with these coloured pencils. They're so much easier to blend. Again, someone suggested I draw a dragon. I attempted to. I never draw dragons, so I covered it up. I didn't like how it looked at all, but I covered it up with this print. Someone else suggested I draw emojis, so I went into my most recently used emojis, and these were the 6 most recently used, so I just drew those using the alcohol markers. And to do the dragon request, I just went onto Pinterest and found a picture of a dragon, because I really have no idea how to draw them, and I just copied that. It was by someone called Iguana Mouth, I think is how you say it. And I really liked this dragon design, so I just copied it down. This is the last spread of the sketchbook. Someone requested that I draw like sweets or a pie, so I drew a cherry pie, which is another Twin Peaks reference. And this was with gouache and coloured pencils again, and I like how this one turned out, especially from a distance. It looks pretty realistic, and I like all the little highlights that I included. And now the final page. My idea for this one, and a suggestion that someone gave, was to redraw one of my old artworks. So I'll include the original one on here. It was actually from exactly a year prior to when I completed this sketchbook, so it would have been 31st of March 2022, that I drew this little cowboy frog, and I decided to redraw him again in the kind of style that I have now. And that's how it turned out. I think it's a good way to finish a sketchbook off, and I like the quote. It says, "You will achieve all you have dreamt of." So it's kind of like an affirmation, like I will achieve my dream of becoming a full-time artist one day. Yeah, that's the finished sketchbook. Completed 31st of March 2023. And I forgot to say at the beginning who these stickers are from, but I'll tag them in the comments. Sorry, I'll tag them down below who these stickers are from. And now I'm going to start, well, I've already started on my next sketchbook. So this is a Winsor & Newton. I'll do a full tour of this one once it's complete, but I'll just do a quick flip through now just with a bit of music. And yeah, the full sketchbook tour. I'm not sure how long it's going to take me to finish this one. Maybe another, let's try for 3 months. I'll say in 3 months time I want to have another sketchbook finished. But yeah, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked sketchbook tours, you can always go back and watch my first one. And please subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. And have a wonderful day. Bye!